EU MEPs endorse ban on new gas cars in 2035. US approves a deal to maintain Taiwanese warships. US and China set to dialogue at Asian security meeting. South Korean production disrupted as truckers strike. Starlink starts to launch service in Southeast Asia. New Zealand to prize sheep and cowbirds. Hello, I'm Johnny. Thank you for joining us on FUNDAY News. It's June 10th, Friday, and here are your top stories. The European Parliament on June 8th voted to support the Commission proposals to reach zero-emission road mobility by 2035. It requires car manufacturers to ban the sale of new cars equipped with internal combustion engines from 2035. And it also means car makers are required to reduce the emissions produced by new passenger cars and light commercial vehicles by 100% compared to 2021 by 2035. Intermediate emissions reduction targets for 2030 will be set at 55% for cars and 50% for vans compared to 2021.
Europe's green transition has moved into the fast lane, and this could be the future of the European auto industry.
With the adopted text, members of European Parliament, also known as MEPs, are now ready to start negotiations with EU member states. In the vote, MEPs also support measures which include a common EU methodology by the Commission by 2023 for assessing the full life cycle of CO2 emissions of cars and vans in the EU market. The EU Executive Committee will submit a report at the end of 2023, detailing the amount of special funds required to ensure the just transformation of the automotive industry to reduce the impact on employment and other economies. The United States has approved a possible $120 million sale of parts to help Taiwan maintain its warships. The U.S. Defense Security Cooperation Agency on June 8th said in a statement it had delivered the required certification notifying Congress following State Department approval for the sale. It said the sale covered unclassified spare and repair parts for ships and ship systems, logistical technical assistance, U.S. government and contractor representative technical and logistical support. The U.S. Defense Security Cooperation Agency said the parts would be sourced from approved U.S. Navy vendors and U.S. Navy stock. The proposed sale will contribute to the sustainability of the recipient service vessel fleet, enhancing its ability to meet current and future threats. Taiwan's Ministry of National Defense on June 9th announced that the sale to Taiwan for naval ship spare parts and related technical support is expected to take effect next month. Asia's premier defense summit, the International Institute for Strategic Studies IIS Shangri-La Dialogue, will take place June 10th to 12th in Singapore. The U.S. Defense Secretary Lloyd Austin and Chinese Minister of National Defense Wei Fanghe are expected to hold their first face-to-face meeting since President Joe Biden took office. World top-level military officials, diplomats, and weapons makers will attend the meeting where ministers debate the region's most pressing security challenges.
8:40 in the morning on Sunday, the 2nd of June, and it is time for our fifth plenary session.
A senior U.S. official said the U.S. expects the substance of that meeting to be focused on managing competition in regional and global issues. Reuters reported that Chinese media have also said Beijing will use the meeting to discuss cooperation with the United States. However, relations between China and the U.S. have been tense in recent months, with the world's two largest economies clashing over everything from Chinese belligerence towards Taiwan to Beijing's expanding influence in the Pacific region. On June 9th, South Korea truck drivers went on strike to protest against the sharp rise in fuel costs, disrupting production, slowing down port activities, and bringing new risks to the tense global supply chain. Media said the strike, if prolonged, holds the potential to severely stall industrial activity in the world's fourth largest economy. Steel-making giant POSCO, Hyundai Motor, Kia Motors are among the companies feeling the pain. An official with the Korean Shippers Council said the reality now is that it is very difficult.
These cargo truck drivers say they have no choice but to strike. It's a matter of life and death for them, they say. Unless the government extends a minimum wage promise, they fear they will have to go back to the old days when they had to work to their death, only to earn enough to survive.
South Korea's Transport Ministry said about 7,200 members, or roughly 30% of the Cargo Truckers Solidarity Union, were on strike. The truckers, regarded as self-employed contractors in South Korea, are seeking pay increases and a pledge that an emergency measure guaranteeing freight rates, which was introduced amid the pandemic and is due to expire this December, will be extended. President Yoon warned strikers on June 9th not to use violence and said the government is trying to resolve the situation through dialogue. Elon Musk on May 27th tweeted Starlink approved by the Philippines following the country's telecommunications regulator approved SpaceX's Starlink satellite internet service. Starlink is expected to make its Southeast Asian debut within a few months. The company plans to launch service in Indonesia, Malaysia, Vietnam, and Myanmar around 2023. However, other companies are not sitting idle. Competitors include companies from the US, Canada, Japan, and local telecoms.
A satellite internet constellation being constructed by Elon Musk's SpaceX. It's currently limited in some parts of the US and Canada, but it's now making some noise here in the Philippines due to its possible entry.
Nikkei reported Philippine telecom giant PLDT said it successfully conducted the country's first in-orbit testing of high-speed broadband connectivity in February using a satellite of Canada's Telesat. Japan's Sky Perfect JSAT Group has begun providing satellite-based internet service in the Philippines, with the service being used for remote monitoring of wind turbines in the northern part of the country. Local rival Globe Telecom signed a MOU with U.S. satellite operator AST SpaceMobile on providing service in the Philippines. New Zealand will be the first country in the world to have farmers pay for emissions from livestock. The country on June 8th released a draft plan to put a price on agricultural emissions in a bid to tackle one of the country's biggest sources of greenhouse gases, belching sheep and cattle. Under draft plan, New Zealand's farmers will have to pay for their gas emissions from 2025. Short and long-lived farm gas will be priced separately, although a single measure to calculate their volume will be used.
In a bid to tackle one of the country's biggest sources of greenhouse gases, the New Zealand government has unveiled a plan to tax sheep and cattle burps. The move will make the island nation the first country to charge farmers for their methane emissions from the animals they keep. New Zealand
Agriculture contributes directly to greenhouse gas emissions through practices such as rice production and the raising of livestock. New Zealand, home to 5 million people, has about 10 million cattle and 26 million sheep. Nearly half its total greenhouse gas emissions come from agriculture, mainly methane. The country plans revenue from the scheme will be invested in research, development, and advisory services for farmers. The proposal includes incentives for farmers who reduce emissions through feed additives. And that's all the time we have for today. Thank you for joining us on FUNDAY News. Let's make every day a fun day. I'm Johnny Wu, your host. I will see you next time.